It was a Tuesday afternoon in late August, and the heat in East Tennessee was the kind that feels like a heavy, wet wool blanket sitting right on top of your chest. I had the trunk of my car open in the driveway, staring down at a heavy 50-pound bag of dark garden soil I had just bought for my wife Linda's flower beds. I was sweating heavily through my shirt, but I was not worried about the heat because I had just finished draining a massive 32-ounce plastic jug of ice water. I drank it right down to the bottom. I reached into the trunk, grabbed the thick plastic corners of that bag, braced my lower back the way I had done a million times before, and pulled it toward my chest. But the second the dead weight shifted onto my legs, my knees just completely buckled underneath me. There was no sharp cramp. There was no sudden pull of a muscle. It was just a terrifying, hollow emptiness right in the center of my thighs, like the solid tissue had suddenly turned into wet paper. I dropped the heavy bag hard against the rear bumper, leaned my forearms against the hot metal of the car, and just stood there breathing heavily. I felt a deep, quiet panic rising up in my chest. I had been drinking a massive amount of water. I carried that big plastic jug with me everywhere I went. I was doing everything a man my age is supposed to do to stay hydrated in the summer heat. But my legs were giving out on me, and despite all the water sitting heavy in my stomach, I felt completely dried out and frail on the inside. My muscles felt like old brittle wood. I spent 34 years working the floor of a logistics warehouse in Knoxville. During the summer, the temperature inside that tin building would routinely climb past 100 degrees. We survived by walking over to the industrial utility sink, turning on the cold tap, and drinking straight from the heavy rubber hose. When you are 30 or 40 years old, your body is incredibly forgiving. It takes that plain tap water, pulls it straight into your hot muscle tissue, and keeps the machine running smoothly. I assumed that biological process would just keep working forever. When I retired, I kept the exact same habits. I drank plain water all day. But my body was no longer the same machine, and the water was no longer doing its job. My daughter Megan came over for Sunday dinner a few days after the incident in the driveway. She is an occupational therapist, and she has a very sharp eye for the things men my age try to hide. She watched me wince and brace my arms against the table just to lower myself into my chair. She saw the giant plastic water bottle sitting next to my plate. She did not give me a gentle lecture. She just looked at me and told me my muscles were suffocating from thirst. I pointed to the empty jug and told her I was drinking gallons a day. She pulled out her phone, sat down next to me, and explained a concept that completely changed my understanding of my own body. She called it silent dehydration. She explained that after we cross into our late 60s, the walls of our cells undergo a physical change. They lose their natural flexibility. They stop acting like fresh, absorbent sponges. You can pour a gallon of water over an old, stiff, dried-out kitchen sponge, and the water will just run right off the sides and disappear down the drain. That was exactly what my aging body was doing. My kidneys were filtering the water aggressively, and the plain water I was drinking was just passing straight through my system without ever penetrating the muscle tissue. I was drowning my stomach, but my legs were starving. She showed me a piece of medical research she had saved. The numbers on the screen stayed in my mind for weeks. It was a report showing that nearly 58% of seniors who made a specific shift in how they hydrated, rather than just drinking larger volumes of plain water, saw profound, measurable improvements in their muscle strength and physical resilience. 58% is a massive number. I realized right then that the weakness in my legs was not just the mandatory tax of getting old. My muscles were literally deflating because they could not hold on to the fluid they needed to maintain their basic structure and their power. Over the next 12 months, I set out to figure out how to make the water stick to my ribs again. Through a lot of reading, a lot of trial and error in my own kitchen, and a lot of long conversations with Megan, I discovered 4 very specific things you can add to your daily water. 4 simple things that completely transform how an aging body absorbs moisture, stops the silent muscle wasting, and gives your legs their solid foundation back. I am going to walk you through all 4 of these additions right now. I will tell you exactly how I use them, and you need to pay very close attention to the 4th one on this list. The 4th thing is a powder I drink right before I go to sleep at night, and it is the exact reason my physician, Dr. Evans, stared at my recent muscle density scan in absolute disbelief. The first shift I made is the simplest one, and it uses ingredients you probably have sitting on your kitchen counter right now. I used to wake up, walk into the kitchen, and drink a tall glass of cold, plain tap water. I thought it was a healthy habit. Now I do not drink a drop of water in the morning unless it has a fresh squeeze of lemon juice and a small, deliberate pinch of mineral salt mixed into it. Now I know exactly what happens when a man my age hears the word salt. We have been conditioned by every doctor and magazine for 40 years to treat salt like it is deadly poison. We are told it makes our blood pressure skyrocket and damages our hearts. But Megan sat me down and explained the massive difference between the heavily processed bleached white table salt sitting in a diner shaker and real, unrefined mineral salt like Himalayan pink salt or Celtic sea salt. Real mineral salt is packed with trace amounts of magnesium, potassium, and vital elements that our aging bodies bleed out while we sleep. When you add that tiny pinch of salt and the lemon to your morning water, 2 things happen. The lemon gently lowers the pH level of the water, making it much easier for your aging intestines to absorb the liquid quickly. The mineral salt acts like a tiny anchor. It grabs onto the water molecules and pulls them directly inside the muscle cells instead of letting them flush straight down to your bladder. I read a fascinating study from the Kyoto Prefectural University of Medicine, published back in 2019. The researchers found that older adults who took in higher levels of these naturally sourced electrolytes had significantly fewer episodes of severe muscle cramping and actually showed better postural stability. Their balance improved just from changing their water. I have a neighbor named Frank. Frank is 72 years old, and he used to tell me over the fence that he felt a terrifying wave of dizziness and stiffness every time he stood up from his favorite recliner. His calves would seize up so badly he had to stand perfectly still for a full minute before he could walk to the kitchen. I told him to throw a pinch of pink salt and a squeeze of lemon in his water the minute he woke up. He looked at me like I was crazy, but a month later, I saw him walking the entire perimeter of his property, pulling weeds and moving steadily without stopping once to rub his legs. You only need a few small grains of salt, just enough to give your cells the tools they need to hold on to the hydration. You wake up and your joints do not feel like rusty hinges anymore. But the lemon and salt only cover the morning foundation. I quickly found out that on the days I decided to do heavy work, like pushing the lawnmower up the steep incline in my backyard or spending hours standing on the concrete floor in my garage, I needed something much more robust. That brings me to the 2nd addition, a clean, high-quality electrolyte powder. I have to be completely honest with you. Whenever I heard the word electrolytes, I immediately pictured my son Derek. Derek owns his own heating and air conditioning business. He works in incredibly hot attics all summer long, and I always see him drinking those bright neon green and electric blue sports drinks out of a plastic cooler. I always thought electrolytes were just for young athletes sweating on a football field or guys carrying heavy metal ductwork. But the hard truth is, an aging body actually needs those minerals far more desperately than a young one. As we age, our kidneys become overly aggressive. They lose their ability to hold on to vital minerals and they excrete them much faster. By the time an older man actually feels the dry sensation of being thirsty in his throat, his muscle tissue is already severely compromised at a cellular level. I looked closely at the neon bottles Derek was drinking. They were absolutely loaded with refined sugar, artificial dyes, and chemical stimulants. That kind of heavy sugar load causes a massive spike in your blood sugar, followed by a devastating crash that leaves your legs feeling twice as heavy as they did before you took a sip. I knew I could not put that in my body. I had to find a clean electrolyte powder. I found one that had zero sugar, zero artificial colors, and just delivered pure magnesium, potassium, and sodium. I started taking half a teaspoon of this clean powder and mixing it into a tall glass of water right around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which is usually when my physical energy would take a sharp nosedive. The difference was profound. I stopped getting that heavy afternoon brain fog. I stopped feeling that slow, creeping fatigue settling into my lower back when I stood at the workbench. There is a gentleman named Marcus who works the morning shift at the local hardware store. He is 69 years old. He told me one morning that he was thinking about retiring early because he simply could not stand on the hard floor behind the register for more than 2 hours without his thighs trembling. I told him about the clean electrolyte powder. I told him to mix a scoop into his water thermos and drink it slowly throughout his shift. He did not change anything else about his routine. 2 months later, I walked into the store and he was carrying a heavy box of brass fittings across the aisle. He told me the deep, exhausting ache in his legs was gone. He had given his body the raw materials it needed to make the water functional. He restored the electrical communication between his nerves and his muscles, and his stamina naturally came back. Before I tell you about the last 2 editions, I want you to stop and think about something. Think about the sheer amount of pride we carry as we get older. Think about the men and women you know right now who have quietly accepted that shrinking, getting weak, and losing their balance is just an inevitable part of the aging process. They stop walking as far. They stop climbing stairs. They sit down more often. And the more they sit, the faster the muscle vanishes from their frames. We do this because we do not want to admit to anyone that we are struggling. We try to push through the weakness until our legs finally give out. I know this because I did it myself. I almost let my pride confine me to a chair, but you do not have to do that. You just have to be willing to look at the problem honestly, change what you put in your glass, and give your body a fighting chance. Now, as much as the clean electrolyte powder worked for my afternoon slumps, it created a small problem in my house. Linda has a very sensitive palate, and she absolutely hated the slightly salty taste of the mineral powder. She told me she would rather just drink her plain ice water and deal with the occasional stiff knee in the evening. I was not going to accept that. I wanted her to have the same strength and physical resilience I was building back into my own body. I started looking for a natural alternative, something that the body would recognize instinctively, something that did not taste like a laboratory mixture. That is how I discovered the 3rd edition, freeze-dried coconut water powder. When you see coconut water in the grocery store, it is usually sitting in a cardboard box or a plastic bottle on a shelf, and it is almost always pasteurized at very high heat to keep it stable for months. That high heat destroys a massive portion of the delicate enzymes and natural minerals inside it. Or worse, the companies pump it full of added cane sugar to make it taste sweeter. But when you find the pure, freeze-dried powder form, it is an entirely different story. The careful freeze-drying process locks in the natural ratios of potassium, magnesium, and sodium exactly the way nature intended them to be, without the heavy sugar load. When you stir a small scoop of this fine powder into a glass of cold water, it dissolves completely and creates a very mild, naturally sweet drink. It does not feel heavy. It does not taste salty. Linda started sipping on a glass of this every afternoon while she worked out in her flower garden. The high potassium content in the coconut water naturally helps regulate blood pressure and immediately goes to work easing the tight, microscopic spasms in tired muscles. The natural magnesium supports deep muscle relaxation. Within a few weeks, I noticed a change in her posture. She was not pressing her hand against her lower back when she came inside from the garden. She was moving with a lightness I had not seen in a long time. She told me she felt a steady, calm energy throughout the evening, and she was actually sleeping through the night without waking up to shift her hips because of joint ache. This natural powder acts as a bridge. It gives your aging body hydration in a format it fully understands and can absorb gently, without forcing it to process heavy synthetic minerals. It is a quiet, powerful daily ritual that keeps the entire system stabilized. We have covered the morning salt ritual. We have covered the afternoon clean electrolytes and the natural coconut water alternative. But everything I have told you so far is just leading up to the final piece of the puzzle. This fourth edition is the one that completely transformed my physical foundation. It is the specific thing that took my legs from just being functional to being genuinely strong, dense, and deeply hydrated. And it is the exact reason Dr. Evans took his glasses off and stared at my lab results in pure disbelief. I am talking about adding a low, highly controlled dose of pure creatine to a glass of warm water right before you go to bed. I know exactly what goes through a person's mind when they hear the word creatine, because I thought the exact same thing when Megan first suggested it. I thought creatine was a powdery supplement designed exclusively for 25-year-old bodybuilders trying to lift massive iron weights at the local gym. I thought it was about vanity and inflating your biceps. I told Megan I had absolutely no interest in bulking up. I just wanted to be able to carry a bag of soil without collapsing in my own driveway. She smiled, opened a thick medical folder she had brought over, and completely shattered my misconception. She explained that outside of the gym culture, inside the actual medical community, low-dose creatine is considered one of the most thoroughly researched, reliable, and profoundly effective tools for protecting aging muscle tissue from wasting away. Here is what nobody explains to us about getting older. Your muscle cells are like tiny engines, and they run on a very specific type of cellular energy. As we cross into our late 60s and 70s, our bodies slowly stop producing enough of that natural energy. When the engines run dry, the muscle fibers begin to shrink, weaken, and eventually die off. But that is only half the problem. The other half is that aging muscle cells lose their physical ability to hold on to water. They become flat, dry, and brittle. What pure creatine does, when taken in very small, consistent amounts, is absolutely miraculous. It quietly rebuilds the energy stores deep inside the muscle fiber, and at the exact same time, it actively pulls water directly into the cell and locks it there. It hydrates the muscle from the inside out, keeping the tissue elastic, dense, and powerful. We are not talking about taking massive scoops like the athletes do. Megan showed me data from clinical studies conducted in both the United States and Japan, proving that taking just 1 to 2 grams of creatine a day, a microscopic amount compared to what the bodybuilders use, can drastically improve lower body strength, significantly increase walking speed, and even sharpen physical reaction times in seniors. And because the dose is so small, research shows it puts absolutely no harmful strain on healthy kidneys. It just quietly does its job while you rest. I started taking about 1.5 grams of pure, unflavored creatine powder and stirring it into a small mug of warm water about an hour before I went to sleep. The warm water helps it dissolve completely, so there is no grit at the bottom of the cup. The physical changes did not happen overnight. This is not a magic trick. But after about 5 weeks of this nightly routine, I woke up one morning, swung my legs out of bed, and stood up on the hardwood floor. I did not have to brace my hands on the mattress. I did not have to wait for the stiffness to leave my knees. I just stood up, and I felt a solid, heavy grounding beneath my feet that I had not felt in over a decade. My thighs felt thick and stable. The terrifying hollow shake in my legs when I walked down the stairs was completely gone. I was walking with a heavy, confident stride. When I finally went back in for my annual checkup and Dr. Evans ran a new DEXA scan to check my bone density and muscle mass, he pulled up the image on his computer monitor and compared it side by side to the scan from a few years ago. The old scan looked like a man who was on a fast track to needing a walker just to get to the bathroom safely. The new scan showed dense, solid, hydrated muscle tissue throughout my quadriceps and my calves. He looked at me in total disbelief and asked me what kind of extreme physical therapy I had been doing. I told him I was not doing anything extreme. I told him I was just making my water work for me. I told him about the lemon and salt in the morning, the clean minerals in the afternoon, and the warm glass of creatine at night. I told him I simply refused to let my legs dry out and rot away while I sat in a chair. The profound relief I feel right now, knowing I can walk up a steep flight of stairs without grabbing the wooden handrail like my life depends on it, is hard to put into words. When my 4-year-old grandson comes running at me full speed across the yard, I can firmly brace my legs, catch his weight, and lift him high up in the air without that terrifying worry that my back is going to give out or my knees are going to buckle under the sudden shift. That is what this is actually about. This is not about looking like a young athlete. It is about keeping your freedom. If your legs go, your independence goes right out the front door with them. Muscle does not just disappear overnight. It leaves your body when you stop giving it a reason to stay. And when you stop giving it the hydration it desperately needs to maintain its structure. You do not have to wait until getting out of a low chair becomes a painful ordeal. You can start making changes tomorrow morning. Go find some real mineral salt. Squeeze a fresh lemon into your glass. Look into a clean electrolyte powder for your afternoons. And seriously consider the nightly routine that gave me my solid legs back. I am not sitting here promising you that you will wake up tomorrow morning with the legs of a 20-year-old man. I am telling you that you can stop the silent decay. You can rebuild the foundation you thought was gone forever. I am going to be right here sitting on this porch, figuring this out one single day at a time, and I will keep sharing exactly what actually works for me. Because we work too hard our whole lives to spend our retirement stuck in a chair watching the world happen through a window. Change what is in your glass. Go get your legs back. I will see you around.